learning to drive a motorhome. Learning to drive an RV motorhome. Hello, you all. I'm Diana Brienne. Well, you know, I love to share little stories from my life, and here goes another one. This is when I learned to drive a motorhome. Well, years ago, we were living down in Texas, and I got the idea of buying a camper. I saw on like a parking lot an old camper for sale for about $3,000. It was kind of junky. So I said to my husband, I said, oh, I want this camper. I want this camper, because I always loved campers and motorhomes, even though I'd never had one. And so my husband went over and looked at it, and he said, no way are we going to buy that piece of junk. But anyhow, in the weeks that were to come, on the weekends, we would have fun. We would take our kids, put them in our 3-road expedition, and away we would go. And we would look at, campers. But then my husband said, no, you know what? I like an RV, a motorhome. And he likes campers. We liked campers too, but he likes to drive. And so we started looking at RVs. Well, he had never even been in one in his life. And before we knew it, we ended up driving to Houston on a Friday, and we bought this great big motorhome, and my husband had to drive it back about 5 hours away. And I am telling you, it was like a bus. It had a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom. It was beautiful. But he had never driven one before, and he was in Houston traffic on a Friday night with construction going on. And the kids and I were following behind him in the car, and I was just terrified. But he did amazing. He does amazing. It's so much. So anyhow, he got the motorhome home, and I had to go down to the DMV to get a license. At that time, if the motorhome was over a certain weight, you needed a truck driver license. So there I went down to the DMV with my 3 little kids at the time, and they were small, and they sat there so proper and so nice while mommy took her test. And I have no idea how I passed it, but I did. It amazed me. I got my, what I call, a truck driver license. So anyhow, well, it was kind of like where you can drive a large vehicle. And so it might not have been exactly a truck driver license, but it was some kind of license that let you drive a very large vehicle. And so my husband at that point began to teach me how to drive this motorhome. So we would take it out, and the kids, were all, buckled in so that they were safe. And we would go into the parking lot, and I would drive around the parking lot. And it was so funny, because as I would drive around, I would jam on the brake, and I would jerk it, and jam on the brake, and jerk it. And that went on what seemed like forever. But gradually, I learned to drive it, and I learned to drive it well. Well, we had that motorhome for about a year, and then we sold it and moved back to Georgia. And then for my 50th birthday, I wanted another motorhome. So I found the exact one I wanted. It had a bunk bedroom for the kids with little televisions. It had our bedroom. It had a living room. It had a kitchen. It was wonderful. So my husband bought it for me for my 50th birthday. And we just traveled the country. At that time, I primarily homeschooled, and so my kids were learning as we journeyed. And we went to 48 of the 50 states, and it was just amazing and wonderful. And my favorite trip was Route 66, and we went from one end of Route 66 all the way to the other, and ended up at Disneyland in California. And it was just wonderful, 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 wonderful time of my life. But during that trip, I remember my husband, he wanted to get some sleep, so he went in the back and he fell asleep, on the bed while I was driving. And so I was driving, and I hit a curb. And when I hit the curb, all the dishes fell out of the cupboards. onto the floor. And of course, that was actually in kind of a parking lot that I hit the curb, but nonetheless, I didn't make the turn big enough. And so I hit the curb, no damage or anything like that, but I hit the curb and it just knocked all the dishes out. So another time we were going down towards Hoover Dam, and there was all this construction, one lane for about 20 miles. And it was all downhill. So I was driving this big bus, as I called it, motorhome, and I drove about 10 miles an hour, very, very carefully, all the way down the hill because I was going to be safe. Safety was number one. When I got to the bottom of the hill, there was a huge string of cars behind me. And as they passed me one by one, some of them gave me some really dirty looks and some of them gave me a few gestures. But I didn't care because you know what? It was most important that we were safe. And so, yeah, I loved having a motorhome. We've had amazing times. And then we sold it because our kids became teenagers and they had sports activities and things they wanted to do to stay close at home. And so we really weren't traveling much. And so we sold it. So I hope someday I get another motorhome. But yeah, I learned to drive that motorhome. And one of my big accomplishments in life. Another story from my life. May God bless you. And I hope to talk to you all soon again. Bye.